Hello and welcome to organizer training in the community and the workplace. This training is intended to cover the very basics of getting organizing campaigns started. This training is presented by the Ottawa General Defense Committee Local 6 and has been developed by members of the Atlanta General Defense Committee. And fair warning, we are revolutionaries. This training will not teach you how to beg politicians for permission or forgiveness, and we really mean it. We're putting forward revolutionary politics, which means addressing white supremacy, capitalism, cis-heteronormativity, patriarchy, and all that requires a fundamental transformation of society that our current political and economic structures can't provide. This means building power from below, organizing each other to build a society in which we collectively decide how we feed, treat, and live with each other. For us, this means empowering regular people to have more control over the things that affect them in life and not delegating it to someone else claiming to represent your desires. So a quick overview of the 5 sections of this training. We'll go over what is organizing. We'll look at some modern examples of successful organizing campaigns. We'll look at how to assess the potential for a win, the principles of AEIOU, which we'll get into later, and goals, strategies, and tactics to win. So what is organizing? Organizing is getting everyday people together to work towards a shared goal for liberation, or building social relationships in order to achieve a particular goal that wouldn't be achievable by acting alone. Real organizing requires action and confrontation with those who oppose change. For example, unions talk a lot about organizing, but don't ever actually confront employers, or very rarely. They'll agree to shitty things like minimum wage contracts, or they'll sell out the new employees. Organizing is important because it enables us to take action together, for ourselves. So what is organizing exactly? Well, it happens all the time, whether it's relying on your neighbors for childcare or transportation, getting your coworkers together for a hangout, putting together a teach-in on your campus, all these things you do collectively that you decide together without a boss or political party telling you to do it. It's all about solidarity and collectivity. Anarchists like to say that the basis of oppression is hierarchy or some small minority governing and exploiting everyone else. As we know, this takes many forms like patriarchy and racism. The point then is to work together towards a shared goal of abolishing systems of power that privilege the few over the many. We want to continually expand who is involved and link together struggles. And the point is to build power. You might remember being told as a kid that we shouldn't talk to, let alone trust strangers. Afterwards, you might have been taught that structures like the free market, government, and institutional racism are all perfectly natural things, have always existed, and are unchangeable. But with a careful study of history, we know that modern states like Canada or the US and their white supremacy, etc., have only existed for some slim part of life on this planet. Major and minor revolutions have shifted the balance of power throughout history, and that work begins with other people. People you haven't met, even strangers. It entails strategic thinking, relationship building, and coordination. Oftentimes when we see protests, strikes, pickets in the media, they're portrayed as spontaneous actions. What you're actually seeing is the product of time-intensive, highly coordinated work among a small group of people. Organizing involves practical skills that anyone can learn, but the basics are learning to make decisions collectively, to communicate ideas and desires coherently, and to work together to develop specific strategies, tactics, and goals that we can all agree on. Organizers have a relationship with the people they are organizing. They bring a certain perspective, but also should be enabling the people they work with, learning from them, and building them up into organizers themselves. Now, what is organizing not? Organizing is not mobilizing people to pursue your particular agenda. It is fundamentally a social activity. So the important consideration is people's needs and their lives. The organizer simply makes the tools available to them. By understanding a particular problem in your life that others experience and that link to larger oppressions, we understand more about each other and the structures of power that shape and dominate our lives. By organizing with others, we collectively build a vision and strategy for a different kind of world. And if you'd like to see some modern examples of successful organizing campaigns, definitely check out the Fritallois restaurant workers in Montreal, the Burgerville Workers Union in Portland, Oregon, the Stardust Family United in New York City, and throughout the states, the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee, who are organizing from within prisons, and the recent West Virginia teacher strike. Next, we'll show you how to assess the potential for struggle. So you'll need to decide what kind of time and resources it might take to motivate people to act for a particular goal. There's some basic criteria that you can use to evaluate how much work it might take to have an impact. So first would be the history and context. Have there been previous fights here? Are people more involved in current or previous struggles elsewhere? Experience and confidence are infectious. For example, many of the people who started in the Ferguson uprising were fast food workers who were organizing at work. Are people paying attention to other external struggles? For example, do they know about Tim Hortons workers fighting to keep their benefits? You'll get a lot of this information by talking to people. Now, listening to others. This is the most basic skill of organizing and is your ability to listen to others' grievances and understandings of a place and the issues. The point is to motivate people, to motivate them to action, and you can't do that without understanding their worldviews, their familiarity with the place and issue, and their motivations and desires for a particular struggle. If you're new to the place and you want to help organize, you'll especially want to connect with others who probably understand the history and context of a place better than you. If you're familiar with the workplace, it will be especially important to listen to how others understand and connect to a particular issue. So, do they know about how a business has changed over the years? Do they know how employees were treated prior to them? Do they have a sense of a company's change in policy over the years? All of this information can give you a better idea of what information you, as an organizer, will need to become familiar with, as well as the kinds of education you'll need to help them through. It's a good idea to make note of reoccurring grievances and events, especially ones you're unfamiliar with. We'll go through in more detail how to evaluate who might be your ally or enemy in a struggle, but the point here is to understand that your co-organizers are people with motivations, desires, and knowledge. And next is your abilities and position. Are you just passing through? You might be in a position where people are likely not to trust you, or you might be someone the people respect because you've been a social leader in that neighborhood or workplace for a long time. Your social position relative to others is also very important. Race, gender, class background, etc. Are you considered an outsider in this community? Considerations like these might determine whether it could be more useful for you to take on a strong leadership role, or to know when to take a step back and invest more time in building up other people as organizers. Especially important here is distinguishing between organizing on the basis of shared principles or shared desires and material interests. It's easy to have political unity with a person or a group. And finally, your resources, time and energy, coding skills, speaking skills, etc. Agitate, educate, inoculate, organize, and unity. The very basic principles any organizer should know. So let's say you have a general idea of what kind of win you're looking for and what's possible. And now is the time to get others involved in the work so you can further develop your goals and strategies together. The AEIOU model takes you through how to talk with others one-on-one about politics to get a sense of where they're at and work together through understanding your collective interests and motivating them to action. Now, some people can imagine liberation, others have to see it and experience it. And finally, organizing is 20% questions, 70% listening, and 10% talking. This means if you think you're not talking enough, you're talking the right amount. If you think you're talking the right amount, you're talking too much. The mine owners, they do not find the gold, they do not mine the gold, they do not mill the gold, but by some weird alchemy, all the gold belongs to them. Are you angry? Good. Anger is a strong fuel for organizing. Agitation is stirring up people by digging for the issues that make them angry. To get through life at work, many of us pave over all the things that piss us off. It is the job of the organizer to reverse this phenomenon, to bring all the issues to the forefront of a person's consciousness. The point is to help them feel justified in their anger and to help understand that it has roots in a system larger than any of us. that this injustice we confront is by no accident and won't just go away. Now, agitation has two parts. One, by asking questions that you'll use to find someone's issues. Second, asking more questions. These are the questions used to get people to tell you about their stories, about the issues, with emotional content. Through these you get their desires, their motivations, their stake in a particular issue. It's useful to lead with a particular thing, like, hey, some of us haven't received our overtime pay for that busy week. Have you noticed that? Or the boss or owner is saying some really sexist shit and is just being creepy in general. Has this ever happened to you? Leading questions are your friend here. From observing your environment before and gathering history from people, you already have some idea of what people are paying attention to and care about. You're going to ask questions that you think will provoke people and provide an opportunity to express how they feel about a thing. It's important here to validate people's concerns and feelings. Showing solidarity will make them feel more comfortable and build trust. You'll also want to you'll have to think on your feet and use your knowledge of history and current events in order to help people understand their problems that are connected to a broader system of exploitation. E is for educate. But what do we mean by educate? In a nutshell, agitation poses the problem. Education explains how collective action is the answer to that problem. But why do we always combine some education with agitation? Because if we just get people angry, we're not doing them any favors. We might even make them feel disempowered by thinking about the enormity of the problem at hand. We all know we face big problems and are told every day that there's nothing we can do about them. We have to unleash their anger and help them think about ways to apply it with others. This is where it is important to be educated ourselves. If we know examples of successful organizing elsewhere, we should share them. As with Agitate, prioritize open-ended questions. Hey, what if everyone refused to get sick notes? What if we all went to the administration building right now and refused to leave? What if we stopped paying rent altogether? What if we refused overtime? The important thing is to help others begin to expand their imagination. We are told every day that things are hopeless, that we can't do anything about it. This is where we can help each other realize the power that we do have. I is for inoculate, to introduce an idea or attitude into the mind. Here we're trying to understand people's concerns for wanting to take action and prepare people for what it could look like. What are their concerns? Well, concerns are good. It means that people are thinking critically about taking action and already thinking about what it might look like if they did. It would be more concerning if people were ready to act without even evaluating the risks themselves. Political action comes with risks, and the more prepared we are for them together, the closer we'll get to achieving our goals. Now, bosses, cops, landlords, abusers spend a lot of time thinking about how to keep us surprised and off guard, because this reduces our confidence and makes us easier to push around. Whenever we are preparing to challenge their power over our lives, we have to imagine how they will try to surprise us, to negate their power. Furthermore, when we as organizers are able to show that we know the playbook of the oppressors, we can build our legitimacy. When we can prepare others to stand up to oppressors, this builds our confidence to stand up even taller. Now, what are they expecting? Begin by asking them what kind of opposition we might face. Let them go through small and big things ranging from harassment or going all the way to firing, eviction, arrest, whatever. Once you've let them think through what to expect, prepare them for things that they might not expect. In a workplace, this might look like the boss playing nice to emotionally manipulate. Or they might go as far as hiring expensive union-busting lawyers. In a neighborhood, it could look like a non-profit coming in and turning your campaign into a electoral politics campaign. At a protest, it could look like another group trying to out-marshal you. And for fear, how do we deal with it? For fear, we return to agitation. We use fear to keep from confronting our problems, and the way to break through them is to remind each other of what it is that is motivating us to move in the first place, where our anger stems from, because anger beats fear every time. And inoculation is not optional. It may be the most important part of organizing, and it's where a lot of organizing falls apart. Organizing and inoculating keeps people from making stupid decisions that expose you before you're ready. Even if you are having a very basic interaction, include at least a little bit of inoculation. Example, if meeting with a coworker at the end, ask them, what do you think the boss would do if he knew we were talking about this? The more you can prepare people for the worst case scenarios, the more reliable you will seem as an organizer and the more confident people will feel in taking risks when they know the consequences. O is for organize. By this point, we've helped people get in touch with their desires for action, thought through how collective action might address their grievances, and help people think about the risks of taking action. It's not a linear equation, but by now you'll be able to ask people to take up some of the work. This means asking people to take up a particular commitment and follow through on them. And tasks are anything that will take you from point A to point B. So making a flyer for an event, booking a space, getting other organizations to sign on to your event, organizing food and transportation, coordinating the route of the march, whatever. This is the most direct work of organizing and can often be the most revealing. Asking someone to take on a task demonstrates their level of commitment to the work, which is important information for an organizer to know. You'll need to be able to know who you can rely on to get something done, especially when your organizing work heats up. It can also serve as open invitation for someone to get involved with the work who might initially be reluctant. This can look like a lot of things. For example, a task can be tailored to that person's interests or skills. If they're good at design, have them design the flyer. If they love talking with people, have them table at the event. It can also be more or less complex depending on the person's involvement. Asking someone to make a flyer is an easy way for someone to start to be more involved and feel included in the work. Ultimately, the idea is to build up other people's confidence in taking up, carrying out, and eventually devising tasks of their own that further your organizing work. Remember, the goal is to make yourself replaceable, and everyone is better off by having more confidence and capable people who can operate autonomously. An important part of organizing is assessing people's stakes and commitment to a particular struggle. And there are 5 types to this. One would be your leader. They're usually empathetic, inspiring, charismatic. They have a solid belief system. They're committed. They often have very organic relationships with the community, and people look to them for their opinions. Number 2 would be your supporters, someone who generally agrees with our project and is willing to take on small tasks. This is where we'll spend most of our time, lifting up supporters to become leaders. Number 3 are your undecideds. They agree but not willing to act now, maybe at no time. They want to learn more. They may become a supporter, or they might just pass in the future. And that's number 4, your pass. Someone who fundamentally disagrees but isn't going to actively organize against you. Essentially a supporter for the other side. And number 5 is your opponents, someone who is actively organizing against you. They may even have the characteristics of a leader. They're essentially the leader for the other side. And something to note, leaders, including ourselves, can have good and bad qualities outside of the scope of this training. Sometimes leaders need to be challenged. This is also why we need to always be building up new leaders. The goal here is to move people up the numbers. Not everyone is going to be a supporter, much less a leader, but we should at the very least know how to neutralize opposition. For example, for opponents, our goal would be to change them to a pass. You can't necessarily change their ideology, but you can mess with their base of support. For example, by out-organizing their ability to influence other people. And finally, U is for unity. At this point, you're ideally acting as a unit that can make strategic decisions together, reflect together, and develop concrete plans of action. For this section, we're going to go into developing these plans. We'll always be going back through AEIOU, and hopefully the new organizers that we've built up will do the same. Everything before in AEIO is about building the basis to take collective action with other people. Unity is about deepening that basis so that we can take stronger and stronger actions together. There's different spheres through which action can be developed. And that will do it. Yes, that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Again, this video only goes over the very basic but effective principles for organizing. There's plenty more to learn after this, so get in touch with your local IWW or GDC for more trainings and organizing support. Special thanks to the Atlanta GDC for helping develop this workshop, and you can reach us at ottawagdc.org.